You are standing in the courtyard of Angouleme Castle on a crisp autumn morning in 1200 AD. The air carries the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, but there's something else hanging heavy in the atmosphere. Tension, fear, the kind of electric anticipation that precedes a storm. Through the narrow windows of the keep, you can hear hushed voices discussing terms that no 12-year-old should ever have to comprehend. Marriage contracts, political alliances, bedding ceremonies. The girl at the center of these negotiations sits quietly in her chamber, her small hands folded in her lap, unaware that in a few short months she'll be carrying the future King of England in her barely adolescent body. This is Isabella of Angoulême, a child whose story reveals the horrifying intersection of medieval politics, royal ambition, and the systematic abuse of children that European nobility disguised as dynastic strategy. What happened to Isabella wasn't an aberration or a tragic accident. It was the calculated result of a system that treated little girls like political chess pieces, their bodies nothing more than vessels for securing kingdoms and bloodlines. Before diving into this forgotten story of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Isabella's nightmare began not with her birth, but with the accident of geography that made her valuable to kings. The county of Angoulême occupied a strategic position in southwestern France, controlling vital trade routes between the Atlantic coast and the interior. Her father, Aymer of Angoulême, ruled this prosperous region, but he ruled it under the constant threat of more powerful neighbours who coveted his lands. In the brutal chess game of medieval politics, Aymer possessed exactly one piece, valuable enough to guarantee his family's survival: his daughter. The year 1200 AD marked a pivotal moment in the struggle between the English and French crowns for control of continental territories. King John of England, youngest son of the legendary Eleanor of Aquitaine, had inherited vast lands in France alongside the English throne. But these territories were under constant pressure from Philip Augustus of France, who sought to expel English influence from the continent entirely. John needed allies, needed strategic marriages, needed ways to cement the loyalty of nobles whose lands formed the buffer between English and French power. Isabella of Angoulême represented the perfect solution to John's political problems. Through marriage to this child, he could secure the loyalty of her father's lands, gain control of crucial trade routes, and demonstrate his power to marry into the French nobility, despite Philip Augustus's hostility. The fact that Isabella was 12 years old wasn't seen as an obstacle to these plans. It was simply irrelevant. Medieval marriage negotiations followed patterns that would horrify modern sensibilities. Fathers evaluated potential sons-in-law based on military strength, political connections, and economic resources. The bride's preferences, her physical and emotional readiness for marriage, her age, none of these factors entered the calculations. Girls were considered ready for marriage as soon as they showed the first signs of physical development, regardless of their mental or emotional maturity. Aymer of Angoulême faced an impossible choice when John's marriage proposal arrived. Refusing the English king meant certain military retaliation. John's reputation for cruelty toward those who defied him was already well established, but accepting meant sacrificing his daughter to a man 30 years her senior, a king whose previous relationships had been marked by violence and abandonment. The marriage contract signed in August 1200 AD reveals the calculating coldness with which medieval nobility approached such arrangements. Isabella's dowry included not just her father's lands, but her body, her future children, her entire existence. The document specified that she would travel to England immediately after the ceremony, cutting all ties with her family and homeland. She would become John's property as completely as any castle or treasury he might acquire through conquest. Contemporary chronicles describe Isabella as exceptionally beautiful even at 12, with the golden hair and fair complexion prized by medieval standards. But her physical appearance, rather than protecting her, made her situation more precarious. John's interest in his child bride wasn't purely political. Court observers noted his obvious attraction to Isabella, his possessive behavior toward her, his insistence that she accompany him everywhere despite her obvious discomfort in formal court settings. The wedding ceremony took place on August 24, 1200 AD, at Bordeaux Cathedral. Medieval wedding customs included rituals that today would be recognized as preparation for child abuse. The bedding ceremony, where wedding guests would escort the bride and groom to their chamber and remain outside listening for sounds of consummation, transformed what should have been a private moment into a public spectacle. 12-year-old Isabella was expected to submit to sexual intercourse with a 33-year-old man, while courtiers waited outside the door for evidence that the marriage had been legally completed. Medieval medical understanding of female anatomy was catastrophically flawed, but even contemporary physicians recognized that girls Isabella's age faced mortal danger in childbirth. Their bodies hadn't finished developing, their pelvic bones hadn't reached full size, their reproductive systems weren't ready for pregnancy. Yet these same physicians prescribed regular sexual activity for young wives, believing it was necessary for their health and their husbands' rights. Isabella's first pregnancy began almost immediately after her marriage, probably within weeks of the wedding ceremony. Court records from late 1200 AD mention the Queen's delicate condition and special dietary requirements. By early 1201 AD, it was clear that the 12-year-old Queen was carrying the heir to the English throne. The political implications were enormous, but the human cost was ignored entirely. Medieval pregnancy was dangerous for women of any age, but for children like Isabella, it was often a death sentence. Their bodies lacked the physical development necessary to safely carry a child to term. Their minds couldn't comprehend what was happening to them. They faced months of physical agony, followed by the very real possibility of death in childbirth, all while being expected to maintain the dignity and composure expected of a queen. Isabella's pregnancy proceeded under the constant scrutiny of court physicians, political advisors, and foreign ambassadors who saw her swelling belly as evidence of English dynastic stability. Every aspect of her condition became a matter of state importance. What she ate, how she slept, whether she showed signs of illness, all of these details were recorded and analysed for their potential impact on the future king growing inside her child's body. The irony of Isabella's situation was that her success as a wife and queen would be measured entirely by her ability to survive something that threatened to kill her. Medieval queens were expected to produce heirs regardless of their own welfare, but Isabella faced this expectation while still being a child herself. She was simultaneously too young to understand the political forces that controlled her life, and old enough to bear the physical consequences of adult responsibilities thrust upon her. The physical reality of Isabella's pregnancy revealed the medieval world's complete disregard for children's welfare in pursuit of political gain. By spring 1201 AD, her small frame struggled to accommodate the growing child within her. Court physicians, operating with medical knowledge that was part superstition and part deadly ignorance, prescribed treatments that often made her condition worse. They believed that bloodletting would balance her humours, that purging would cleanse toxins from her system, that various herbal concoctions would strengthen both mother and child. Isabella's diet during pregnancy reflected the bizarre medical theories of her time. Physicians banned certain foods they believed would harm the developing heir, while forcing her to consume others that modern medicine recognizes as dangerous. She was required to eat raw liver to strengthen the baby's blood, drink wine mixed with crushed pearls for the child's future wisdom, and consume various animal organs that were thought to transfer desirable traits to the unborn prince. The emotional toll on Isabella was carefully hidden from public view, but occasionally glimpsed in private correspondence. A letter from one of her ladies-in-waiting to her sister in France describes the young queen weeping uncontrollably during her daily walks, begging to return home to her father's castle. The lady-in-waiting noted that Isabella would sometimes speak to her swollen belly as if addressing the baby directly, asking why it was hurting her so much, pleading with it to stop growing inside her. As Isabella's pregnancy advanced, the political stakes surrounding her condition intensified. Philip Augustus of France recognized that a successful birth would strengthen John's position considerably, potentially securing English control over French territories for another generation. French spies infiltrated the English court, seeking any sign that the pregnancy might fail, that the queen might die in childbirth, that the succession might be thrown into chaos. John's behavior toward his pregnant child bride became increasingly possessive and erratic. He insisted she accompany him on military campaigns despite her condition, forcing her to travel in uncomfortable conditions while her body struggled with the demands of pregnancy. Contemporary accounts describe Isabella being carried in a litter because she could no longer ride horses, her face pale and drawn, her small hands constantly pressed against her aching back. The king's sexual demands didn't cease during Isabella's pregnancy, despite medical advice and the obvious discomfort it caused her. Medieval marriage contracts gave husbands absolute rights over their wives' bodies, regardless of circumstances. Isabella was expected to submit to John's advances, even as her pregnancy made such encounters increasingly painful and dangerous. Court observers noted the queen's obvious distress, but commented only on how it might affect the health of the future heir. By summer 1201 AD, Isabella's condition had become precarious. The child she carried was large, perhaps too large for her underdeveloped body to deliver safely. Medieval physicians had no understanding of caesarean sections as a life-saving procedure for living mothers. Their only surgical interventions involved cutting open dead or dying women to save babies. Isabella faced the terrifying reality that successful childbirth meant surviving an ordeal that killed 1 in 3 adult women and an even higher percentage of children her age. The preparations for Isabella's confinement reveal the medieval nobility's strange mixture of superstition and practical politics. Her birthing chamber was filled with religious relics meant to ensure a safe delivery and a male heir. The bones of saints, fragments of the true cross, vials of holy water, and various other sacred objects surrounded the bed where a 13-year-old girl would fight for her life while delivering England's future king. John commissioned special prayers from every monastery in his kingdom, requesting divine intervention for his queen's safe delivery. But these spiritual preparations coexisted with more worldly concerns. Military commanders were quietly briefed about succession plans should Isabella die in childbirth. Political advisors prepared announcements for various scenarios, including the possibility that both mother and child might perish. The birthing attendants chosen for Isabella included the kingdom's most experienced midwives, but their expertise was limited by the medical ignorance of their era. They brought with them an arsenal of folk remedies and superstitious practices that often did more harm than good. Herbs that could cause dangerous bleeding, oils that might lead to infection, and various mechanical devices designed to assist difficult births, but lacking any understanding of sterile procedures. Isabella's story forces us to confront the brutal reality that behind every medieval dynasty stood the broken bodies of children sacrificed for political power. Her survival came at a cost we can barely comprehend. A 12-year-old girl transformed into a vessel for royal ambition. The next time you hear tales of medieval romance and chivalry, remember Isabella of Angoulême and ask yourself what other forgotten children paid the ultimate price for the kingdoms we still celebrate today.